You teach at the university where actually it all started, not in May, in fact, but in March.
Yes. I would just add one thing, which is that things were not doing so well for everybody back then. Now we tend to judge a country by its unemployment rate, which I don't think is the only criterion. But by that criterion, yes, indeed, it was okay. But if you were a factory worker, if you were from the former colonies who had just decolonized, if you were a migrant, if you were a woman, if you were a gay person, I don't think things were doing so well in France in 1968, which is also the reason why it went viral.
In 68, the unemployment rate is low. You've come out of the post-war years. The country's doing better and better, and that's when people want the freedoms and that Brice Lalonde was describing a short while ago, rising aspirations.
We should never separate, I think, cultural or social freedoms, such as sexual liberation, listening to rock and roll and all these things, and the political dimension of May 68. After May 68, we have separated these two. We tend to say that today there was a cultural victory of May 68, and I would say a political failure, because obviously communism or leftism did not take power. Indeed, back then it was all one thing. You would go down in the street and you would protest and you would want the world to change.
But they weren't talking about the Prague Spring, which was going on at the same time. The brave people of then Czechoslovakia rebelling against the Soviet domination.
They were in tune and in touch with lots of movements, similar movements around the world, from Latin America to Japan to the rest of Europe, and indeed to those fighting the Soviet, form of communism.
Bruno Barbet, what strikes us when we were looking at some of your photos was that some of the students, they're not hippies. Some of them are wearing neckties.
Exactly, they were very like you with a nice tie.
Because in mass media, we tend to. We can see this picture. Well, you can't see it there because it's closely cropped. But you see there, they're well dressed with jackets. These aren't hippies.
Right. Yes, that's something which, when you look the photograph 50 years later, how formal were some students. But I would like just to come back to what François says. I mean, what for me was fascinating, what May 68 was fascinating, is the dialogue suddenly between, and at the end of May 68, the fact that the comportement, the way, the behavior of the patron and the workers, they start to have a better understanding and communication, which was not the case.
Before it was what? There's the boss?
And it was very conservative. I guess compare even to countries like Germany at that time, where the union were strong. And that's, I think, one of the interesting points of May 68.
To make things informal, yeah.
To make things more open in terms of dialogue.
Indeed, management, the economy used some of the lessons of May 68 to change the type of relations you have within a corporation. But that's, I would say, a detour. That's using it for another purpose. Back then, informality was partying in the street, was sexual liberation, was a global movement of emancipation. It was not for, a more informal atmosphere within an office.
Brice Lalonde, there's rising aspirations for a lot of the students. We see the well-dressed ones in that picture. Life is better than that of their parents, but at the same time, you still have in the late 60s an acute housing crisis.
I was very proud to be a student and to be in UNEF. That was the only trade union. It was not left or right, it was the only one. And what we wanted to do in May 68, we wanted to be useful. We wanted to be useful. We wanted to change the world, yes. And now about the failure. What was in May 68, you had the Gaullists and the Communists. These were the two dominant parties. And they agreed. They had this sort of an agreement between them on nothing more important than the nation, nothing more important than go work and shut up, very hierarchical society. And what happened after is that 2 years or 3 years after, boom, the whole thing broke. You had the socialists who got more important than the communists, and you had Giscard d'Estaing as a sort of a new liberal, conservative liberal who won over the Gaullists. And that changed the whole pattern, because these guys were more European, they were more for decentralization, they were more for consumerism, and the women's lib movement started in May 68. So it was, I think, highly successful in changing the French society.